All right. I think we are
Awesome.
going to go ahead and get rolling this morning. It's so nice to see everybody joining us here on this very cold February morning. And we haven't had Talk Tuesday in a little bit because we had to cancel our last session due to lots of school closures and delays after the very large snowstorm at the end of January. So it's really nice to all be back together, learning about attendance and engagement together. My name is Caroline Calhoun. I am the facilitator, producer of Talk Tuesday alongside our colleagues at CSDE, Kari Sullivan Custer and Jay Brown. We are delighted this morning to be joined by our colleagues out of Attendance Works. We have Susan Lieberman and Emma Herdeen here this morning, and we are so excited to have a spotlight on Waterbury Public Schools with Principal Hannah Sam joining us to share all about bright spots and success stories from Waterbury and the wonderful work she has been doing in district. So with that, we are going to go ahead and get cranking here. Let's go to our next slide, Jaren. And if you all would like to introduce yourselves and just say hello in the chat as we continue to build community in this space, and maybe drop a thought about what you're hoping to learn today about attendance efforts, in particular at that elementary level. So thank you all so much for being here, and let's go ahead and go to the next slide. As always, we have some highlights and happenings to share with you about what's happening across the state in the world of attendance and engagement. We have CSDE's new this school year student support series, and registration is open for February 19th. The session coming up is all focused on mental health. As a reminder, this series does allow clinical staff to earn continuing education credit by attending the sessions. So we encourage you to sign up for that. And then once we get the next round of sessions, we will advertise those for you as well. This is the last one on the flyer you'll see attached there. Let's go to the next slide, Jaren. And we wanted to let everybody know that this year's Connecticut School Counselor Association annual conference is now open for proposals. The conference will be at Trinity College in Hartford on May 21st. And registration won't begin until mid-March, but those calls for proposals are open now until March 2nd. And we know that many folks in this space are very much attuned to this world of counseling and working with our students in schools in that capacity. So we encourage folks to check out the requirements for proposals and consider creating some sort of proposal for a session that might really benefit your colleagues across the state. I know that Kari and I collaborated with colleagues at Bridgeport Public Schools a few years ago and presented, and it was a really positive experience. So go ahead and check that out if you are so inclined. Next slide, please. We also wanted to let you know that the National Assembly for Family Engagement and Education, or NAFCE, their conference is going to be in October in San Diego. So if you are inclined to check that out, the registration is already open for that. And I like how they added in their descriptor to join them in sunny San Diego, a little little incentive if you would like to attend that conference. It is reportedly a wonderful one. I have not had the opportunity to attend that before, but everybody who has wonderful things to say. So that is NAFCE. And let's go to the next slide. As always, Kari and I and Jay, we want to highlight for you some of the resources we have at CSDE that are particularly applicable to this time of year. So we know that we are fighting, everybody's trying to stay healthy and fighting those winter illnesses that tend to peak throughout this winter season. So the When is Sick, Too Sick for School flyer is available on the CSDE portal for Better With You. All of our attendance campaign materials are there. This is just one item. It's available in English and in Spanish. So please take advantage of that asset. It's helpful just as we try to have really clear communication with families about when we should be keeping kids home and when we can send them back to school. Next slide, please. Each time we gather for Talk Tuesday, I try to highlight something from a recent Marshall memo, which does a nice job of providing a little synopsis of all things related to education that have come out in the media. So Kim Marshall organizes this newsletter that you can subscribe to if you don't already do so. And in the January 5th edition, there was a great article that came out in the Elementary School Journal. This was by Jason Miller and Kimberly Everett, I believe. And this article was all about how we can work as communities in our schools to retain new teachers. We know that education is a really challenging career option, and we know that the research shows us that there's a high turnover of new teachers. So this really dug into how can we keep new teachers from feeling overwhelmed or burnt out and from leaving the profession. So there were a number of recommendations that came out from this research, and these top 3 practices that would increase statistically the potential for teachers to stay put in a district. We know that a lot of time and effort can go into training beginning teachers, and so wanting to keep that value, that relationship as folks are beginning their career. So the 3 highlights there were assigning first-year teachers mentors who are in the same building and who really are a positive representative of the school's culture. And I think that's really that key to help them develop relationships with colleagues through all those formal and informal activities. I think back to my own beginning years as a classroom teacher, and my mentor was a very positive influence. And even though I left that school many years ago, she and I are still in touch, and that mentor-mentee relationship can really be a deciding factor in keeping new teachers at their buildings. The second strategy that was highlighted was really trying to implement policies that support a culture of collective responsibility for student success. And I thought this was particularly apropos for our conversations around attendance and engagement, as Kari and I are always plugging with everybody we talk to this idea of collective responsibility and an all hands on deck approach for our students and for their success, whether it's in the realm of attendance or in academic achievement or social emotional learning, but that collective responsibility is key. The last highlight from this article was that it really helps new teachers want to stay if we are using a teacher evaluation process that is very transparent about the criteria for what it means to have effective instruction and what teacher-student relationships look like, and really puts the principal in the position to encourage that teacher and to coach effective practices. And I am quite certain that Principal Sam, who's joining us today, likely has lots of experience with that as we work as leaders in the education sphere to coach our younger teachers and make them feel comfortable and want to stick around in their buildings. So if you'd like to dig in further, the link is there for you with the research, and I think also the contact information for the article's authors. So that's our Marshall memo information for today. Next slide, please, Jaren. As always, our Connecticut Home Visit Hub, which is managed by our coordinator, Nushet Black-Burke, and staffed by facilitators and coaches. This is our free, open to all 2-hour virtual training for home visitors. It is not just for our districts that receive LEAP funding. It is open to everybody. And it's a great way to ground yourself in the philosophies and best practices of home visits and home visiting as we work to build those relationships that are trusting with our families. So the next training for that is February 19th from 10 to 12, and the link is provided there for you on the slide. Let's go to our next slide, Jaren. As always, Kari and I always want to make sure you have access to all sorts of resources from CSDE. So we just leave these here so they are at your fingertips. Everything from Bright Spots across Connecticut, those School is Better With You materials, the EdSite data portal, and a whole host of other resources. So I think that's everything for my introductory section. I am going to pass it next. If we go to the next slide, Jaren, I'm going to pass it to Kari to talk to you about some data.
Wonderful. Thank you, Caroline. And it is so nice to see all of you here, so many familiar and friendly faces. I wanted to start with a data drop today and to share how we started from the beginning of the year through December. So this is a bar chart showing statewide chronic absenteeism rates in October, November, and December. Each cluster is a month. So the first cluster is our October, and November is second, and December is third. So in October, we have seen rates decline steadily from 17.9% in 2023 to 16.1 in 2024 and down to 13.3 in 2025. So that is more than a 4-point drop over 2 years in October. And we saw a very similar pattern in November, with a significant drop from October and November. So that tells us that we had a really strong start to the fall. So think about things that you did this past summer and fall to start the school year strong. That's important to ending the school year strong. So, but we know that in December, January, February, we see lots of respiratory illness. We see vacations, and we have short months with lots of half days. And so, almost expectedly, we saw December chronic absence rate go up a little bit. So we started 18.7 in 2023, down to 17.1 in 2024, with a slight increase to 17.6 in 2025. That is reflected in many of our districts, although I do want to say that when I looked at alliance districts, about half of our alliance districts were able to stay the same as last December or decrease from last December. And so even though we may be seeing our chronic absence rates go up in December, I want to give you all a big pat on the back because this is hard work and this is the hardest time during the illnesses and the vacations, and these are part of our cycle of attendance. Last year we peaked in February, but that's when the flu peaked last year. This year, the flu peaked early. So we had 5,000 cases of the flu the week before Christmas, where we only had 300 the year before. And so we had lots of people out for the flu, including faculty and staff, teachers and staff. And we also had, when I was talking to districts, families who kept their students home who were well so that they wouldn't be sick over the holidays. So that was a difficult time, and I just want to recognize this. But I do want to commend everyone on a really strong start of the school year. January chronic absence rates, we're still collecting. We're collecting them this week from your data departments and IT departments, and they'll be updated next week. And we've been meeting with all of our LEAP districts over the LEAP leadership team, Caroline, myself, and Nushat Blackburk, and we're hearing, that January people was better than December, and we didn't have the level of illnesses that we had in December across the state. So keep up the good work. The data is important, but it's not you want to know what's going on. You want to have your district attendance teams. And I wanted to share, I didn't have time to put this in a slide, but I was on a webinar. Caroline and I were on a national webinar this week for something called the 50% Challenge. And some of my takeaways from that session, where we heard from 3 other states, we heard from Virginia, Ohio, and Colorado. And here are a couple takeaways. And from that, for me, important strategies. Integrating health as a core attendance strategy. We know that, and you'll hear more, that many of our students and our families are missing the most school because of health. So those partnerships with your health centers, your pediatricians, your messaging to families that how sick is too sick, like stay in front of that. When is it important to come back to school? After being sick, and when is it acceptable? It is acceptable to cough in school, but not to come to school with a fever, or if a student has been throwing up. Elevate DARTs from compliance structures to active cross-sector decision-making teams. Stronger, active district attendance teams are better than ones, of course, that are held because we're supposed to hold them. So there is some work being done to share across districts. Many of you might have participated in our district attendance team survey, and we're going to publish a report about that so we can share what others are doing. But those who met at least monthly and had a strong representative across many departments on their teams are having much better success with their attendance, and that includes their school attendance teams as well. That's what's really important to me, and to promote layered multi-strategy approaches to reinforce that if you
This morning.
thank you. That LEAP and attendance strategies work best with a comprehensive multi-system of support. MTSS is the backbone to addressing attendance, so you're looking at it from many different levels. And the evidence shows that schools implementing 5 or more aligned strategies see greater attendance improvements than those relying on 1 or 2. So you have to layer in your attendance strategies and interventions to see an impact, because there's so many different reasons why kids are missing school. And that's all I want to share for that for now. And I did kind of go off deck, and I apologize for that, Caroline. I will, but this was such a great webinar, and I think it'd be nice, Caroline, if we shared the link to the webinar with the Talk Tuesday community. Next slide, please. I just wanted to put this in front of you. This is a slide we use in our basic trainings about what are the key ingredients to addressing attendance, the systems and structures that must be in place for a comprehensive approach. You've got your district attendance team, your school attendance team, your data tracking and analysis, both your local data, EdSite data, equitable policies and procedures, as I said before, MTSS, your strategic partnerships, for instance, with your health, and shared accountability and continuous improvement. So we like to say, what's the secret sauce? And that's an all hands on deck. The work of attendance does not belong to your school counselors or your school social workers. It belongs to all of us. And we need to have a mindset shift from a punitive approach to families and students to us building stronger relationships. And we link here to our prevention intervention guide. Next slide. So at this point, as we're turning the corner, the weather's getting a little warmer, and we're looking at spring. We know that early gains suggest prevention, early outreach are working. So who are those students who have just become chronically absent over December and January? And we need to be reaching out to them. December reinforces the need for health-informed, family-centered responses. And we know that chronic absence remains uneven across students groups, which means targeted strategies still matter. I was looking at grade level chronic absence across the state today, and our high schools need a lot of focus, both on what are we offering for academics that's engaging and of interest to students, and how are we making school a place that they want to be. Next slide, please. I kind of said all of this. Use January, February as a time to reset, prioritize relationship-based outreach, keep attendance messaging hopeful and forward-looking. And then the next slide is the last one. To end strong, we're going to be covering a lot of this in our upcoming Talk Tuesdays. Planning for spring begins last month, right? Some of these slides were from last month when we canceled our Talk Tuesday. So incentives and motivation. March is approaching, and early planning protects momentum. I know a lot of us do March Madness. We have, where's Latasha? We have our attend dance surprises, and we tell kids they're coming, and so they come to school because they're excited, they want to participate. Are incentives meant to replace strong attendance systems? No, these are short-term supports that complement existing practices and are important on half days because they get the kids to come and be of interest. And they don't have to be big or costly. Recognition, routines, and relationships matter most. And so we will be covering more of this as we move forward with our Talk Tuesdays this year. I think that's it for me. Caroline, pass it back to you. I'm so excited to have Attendance Works here today. We've been working hard on these bright spots in our four districts and to share with you all what they've learned and just they've been just so impressed by the efforts that our schools are putting forward, and it's really important to share those with you here today. So I'm going to turn back to Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you, Kari. Let's go to the next slide, Jaren. And we would be delighted at this stage to introduce you to Susan Lieberman and Emma Herdeen, who are both joining us from Attendance Works, and Principal Hannah Sam from Waterbury. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction for all three of these professionals joining us today. Emma is a senior fellow with Attendance Works, and she supports district and school level structures, best practice implementation to increase student attendance and engagement. And she really brings deep expertise to this work, having worked with nonprofits, family literacy programs, traditional public and charter schools, as well as community partnerships. So very grateful to have you with us today, Emma. Susan is a strategic leader with over 35 years of experience working in the fields of education and mental health as a licensed social worker and certified teacher. Susan has managed community and state-run programs as well as worked directly with youth and families. Previously, she co-chaired the Maine Governor's Task Force to engage Maine's youth. And so we are very happy to have you here with us today, Susan. And last but not least, Principal Hannah Sam. She is joining us in her role as principal at FJ Kingsbury School in Waterbury. Hannah is a dedicated leader. She is committed to excellence in teaching and learning and nurturing a positive school culture. Under her leadership, the school has earned recognition as a school of distinction, which we offer you our congratulations, Principal Sam. That is remarkable. She has enhanced student mental health support through strategic community partnerships. She has implemented strategies to improve attendance and family engagement, and drawing on her diverse experiences as a teacher and IB middle years program coordinator, instructional coach, assistant principal, Hannah brings a wealth of knowledge to her role to improve student outcomes. She also holds advanced credentials in educational administration and is currently pursuing her doctoral studies in educational leadership. So happy to have all three of you here in this space to share your expertise this morning, and I will pass the baton first to Emma.
Thanks so much, Caroline. And Kari, thank you for having us. Susan and I are delighted to be part of this conversation today. Here's what we're looking forward to the rest of our session together. Let's go to the next slide. So we'll go over the purpose of a bright spot project that Attendance Works and CSD have just completed. And we wanted to encourage you to read it when it's actually published. And then today we will feature Mrs. Sam, Principal Sam. We'll look at some findings, ongoing challenges, local considerations. What are those recommendations? And then we'll look at the state recommendations in the next Talk Tuesday. And then we'll introduce Principal Sam and hear her bright spot story, and we'll leave some opportunity for questions and reflections at the end. So let's go to the next slide. So we've learned a lot from you all. It's been an amazing project. It's been an amazing collaboration. And one of the studies that we've learned a lot from has been this 2023 school survey that's been sent to about 5,500 parents. At least that's what the response was. And this comes from the School is Better With You. And some of the learnings really help us understand what are the factors to help with attendance. And as you see from the graph, it's really about being in the community, feeling like you're part of it, right? That you have that ownership in the community. You have involvement with clubs and activities and the fun activities that promote that social emotional development and connection with peers and with staff. And then for the families that are Spanish speaking, you'll see that having a trusted adult who speaks the language and making sure that that communication is right on is one of the most important pieces. So this study, and there's a lot more to unpack, but this is one of the key factors that we're were important for us to bring today. So we're building on what we've learned from your state to actually address this health, well-being, and safety as we think about improving attendance. So let's go to the next slide. So how did we choose this bright spot and the four schools? We looked at through the collaboration with CSDE, we looked at sustained chronic absence decrease over the last 3 years. We looked at the strong commitment of the schools and the districts to focus in on attendance through addressing or prioritizing the health, well-being, and safety of students and families. And then we looked at noticeable shifts in culture and climate, and really that positive engagement with students and their families. And so four schools were selected, and today you'll get to hear from Waterbury District, and Principal Sam again is representing FJ Kingsbury. So let me invite Susan to take us through the guiding frameworks and more of what we want to share with you today.
So excited to be here with everyone. Next slide. And thank you, Emma, for just giving us the background to what we were doing. What guided our analysis of the lessons learned were these two conceptual frameworks. One is the attendance work's key ingredients of systemic change to reducing absenteeism. And these are very important because, especially when working in alignment with each other, they support a systemic approach that shapes policy as well as practice. And you can see that students and families are in the middle, schools, and then the district. And we have these components of shared responsibility, which we'll talk a lot about, the capacity building and how we build the capacity of district, school, and community partners, actionable data, the positive engagement, the key to strategic partnerships, and adequate resources. And then the other piece that was very important is the whole school, whole community, whole child approach. And when health, safety, and well-being are priority, this approach offers an excellent framework for understanding who's involved in addressing health and well-being. And because we know research has shown us over and over again that student health and academic achievement are closely intertwined. So we can't look at them separately. We need to look at everything all together. And this framework provides an infrastructure schools can use to engage students, families, staff, and the community at large. Because if we want to improve cognitive, physical, social, emotional development of every child, we need to be looking at this entire framework. And you'll notice that all of these come up in our conversations about the schools that we're about to highlight. Next slide. So what I thought was interesting when I think of the findings, it really goes back to what Kari just was talking about, which is that it's a multi-layered approach. It's a comprehensive approach. And I thought it was interesting when she mentioned that there's 5 or more aligned strategies. And that's exactly what we found was really key to the success in all 4 schools. So they're going to talk about shared responsibility and leadership. So you can't really talk about shared responsibility unless you also include that leadership. And that's strategically integrating student attendance and well-being into existing district efforts and the work of community partners. It's about building the capacity of school staff and community partners. It's about everybody taking that data-informed approach, that positive, I should mention, that positive data-informed approach to advance student well-being, engagement, and attendance. And it's incremental steps to ensure that all staff have the background, not just certain staff, but that all staff have that background. It's about that initial overview and then building on training so practices are integrated. It's not just a one splash, but we've got to think about how these efforts are integrated. It's also about working as teams, but across teams. It's creating that welcoming schools to support and also supporting new teachers. And Principal Hannah Sam is going to be talking about all of that. It's about not just accessing actionable data, but how do we utilize it? How are we integrating it into our academic and behavioral metrics? It's about adopting positive engagement outreach, it's about relationships, relevance, and rigor, and mentor opportunities. But it's also about those strategic partnerships to support student health and well-being, whether it's a city or county Department of Health connecting with mental health providers. But it's about that common messaging, integrating our efforts, aligning our efforts, and sustaining the work. So next slide. So ongoing challenges, this may be familiar to many of you. It's the ongoing mental health challenges, particularly coming out of the pandemic. We've seen a higher rate of anxiety, sustaining those practices when there's staff turnover, making sure that we're not relying on one person, but what happens when there's staff turnover? How do we sustain that? Also balancing competing priorities. And then there's a reality of responding to negative impact of expanding deportations and what that has on our schools. So these were also, we felt it was really important to include those ongoing challenges because that's what we're all facing. And we're trying to build in our learnings, findings, and recommendations and trying to address these challenges. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about the recommendations for local practice. This is actually a two-part in our series, and we'll be able to talk about the recommendations for state practice and state consideration in 2 weeks on February 24th, where we'll get to hear from two more schools that are part of our bright spots in secondary, in the middle school and high school. So the recommendations are about establishing that shared responsibility and leadership. I told you it's a theme that you're going to hear over and over again. It's about that consistent and integrated leadership from both the district central office and the building administrators. It's working together. It's also about district leadership building connections with community leaders, but creating that consistent connection with the school buildings. So it's not just a siloed effort. It's building capacity of the central office and building leadership to support staff and students. How are we making sure that everybody is getting prepared and that it's about how are we building that capacity and making sure it's a welcoming school, making sure that we're creating an interactive curriculum, one that builds on making sure that student voice is included. It's about data so that all central office staff and teachers know how to integrate attendance data with academic and behavioral metrics. It's about elevating student and family voice. So this means this includes increasing student interactions in the classroom with hands-on experiential type learning. It's about how do we elevate student voice, even in the elementary school, in the development of programming and decision making? And how do we make sure that families are also involved? And the health. How do we deepen that understanding of reasons for health absences? We know that health is one of the primary reasons. So how do we dig deeper into determining those reasons? And that leads to a greater understanding of the solutions. Health may be symptomatic of something else going on in the classroom, but let's figure out what that is and what's going on, as well as strengthening health community partnerships with a unified and collaborative approach. So with that, next slide, I'd like to introduce, or I think Caroline has already introduced Principal Hannah Sam, who's going to talk about what she is doing and what they're doing in Waterbury, and particularly at F.J. Kingsbury Elementary School. It was very inspiring to see their school in action and spend a day there. So without further ado, I think I'm just going to pass this on to Principal Sam.
Thank you, Susan, for having me, and thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. I think I will be remiss if I don't talk about my background as far as what has shaped what I do here in Waterbury. So a few decades ago, more than 2 decades ago, as a teacher in the school that I was a teacher at, the school had a school pledge. And part of the pledge was if the students fail, then we as educators, we failed. And that has resonated with me. It stayed with me ever since as I journeyed through my educational work. And also being a high school administrator, I saw what happened in terms of kids dropping out and not attending school and the attendance efforts that we put in to make sure kids were in school. And we know from research the impact on teachers have on students. And so every day, that's how I approach my work as far as making sure that students are successful, because in the back of my mind, if they fail, then I've failed. And so what I like to do is looking at the big picture in terms of why we do the work. And attendance for me is not secondary. It comes first. Because if we're looking at instruction, if we want to increase outcomes for kids, the first thing that we have to think about is, are the kids here? And if they're not here, then everything that we're doing is really not going to amount to anything. And so attendance is at the core of everything that we do here. As a principal, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that I set the tone to make sure that our kids are here. They feel safe, that they're learning, and also the teachers have the support they need to be able to do the work so that we can make our kids successful, not just in elementary school, but middle school, high school, and beyond. Because we know, for example, if they're not coming to school, they're not going to be receiving the instruction. If they're not receiving the instruction, they're not going to be reading on grade level, third grade. And we know the ripple effect. If they're not reading on grade level, they're not able to access the curriculum. And that ripple, it goes on and on and on to high school and the dropout rate. And we know what happens. And so it's about looking at the work as a whole. I am a systems person. I look at the big picture before we funnel into the micro, so that and being able to communicate the why we're doing what we're doing so that teachers understand, and everybody that's involved in making sure our kids are educated and they're successful. And I do believe that with the experience that I've had from pre-K through 12th grade, that elementary level is key to our students being successful. If we can go to the next slide. So coming into Waterbury, coming into Kingsbury School, I think one thing I have to say is that we have amazing teachers. They're always open to new ideas. They're selfless, they're dedicated, and they're problem solvers. And so looking at our data, I think we have to go to the next slide. There we go. So this is Kingsbury. This is who we are. We are a diverse school community, mostly Hispanic, 66% Hispanic. African American 23.7. We do have white is 2.8, Asian 2.3, Native American 0.7, with a total of 427 students. Since 2022 through 2025, last school year, we've decreased our chronic absenteeism rate 9.9%, as you can see, and our goal for this school year 2025-2026 is to decrease it by another 5%, which will be 18.8%. We hopefully we can go decrease it more than 5%. But as we speak, looking at our data yesterday, that was Monday, severely chronically absent students, 1.8%. That means we've lost these students. I did not intentionally include moderately chronically absent students because those are kids that we can remedy into. So we're doing all we can to make sure that the kids are coming to school so we can meet our goals. So as of yesterday, our moderately chronically absent students were 16%, which we hope to reduce. If we can go to the next slide. So coming into Kingsbury, having the dedicated staff, we had to look at the data, meeting with the teachers, what was going on, and coming up with the priorities, these priorities. The first one was alignment of everything that we're doing in this building and having shared leadership, because leadership should not only rest in the principal, it has to be shared. And I always look at it as a puzzle. Everybody in the building is a piece of the puzzle, and we have to put it together to make that beautiful mosaic picture. And so that is what I share with everyone that I work with, including here at Kingsbury. And so that was the first thing, to make sure that everyone has a role to play in this work that we're doing, because we're already doing it, but we have to look at it as a big picture so that teachers and educators or staff members don't see it as separate, disconnected initiatives in the building. The other thing was building staff capacity and supporting well-being. That means training staff. So as of last year, we had second step. Second step, teachers were trained to make sure that they're able to provide those lessons to students. We had at the beginning of the school day, we have 10 to 15 minutes of second step lessons to make sure that we're teaching students in terms of setting goals, regulating self-regulation, soft skills, all these skills that students need. There's a curriculum that we followed. We had a scope and sequence every grade level all the way to the end of the school year. This year, we're using Every Monday Matters, and we still follow the same. So making sure that teachers were trained to be able to deliver those instructions. That also came with looking at behavior in terms of behavior expectations. So as a school, we have ROARS expectations. So not just us doing it individually in our classroom, but school-wide expectations. Everybody knows what our expectations are, and then funneling down into the classrooms in terms of teacher expectations. And in some of our classrooms, and not all, and I will be honest, the teachers have expectations that students should expect from them as teachers too. So in terms of, we have expectations of students, but teachers also say, this is what I'm going to do. If you're doing this, these are the expectations that what you should expect from me as a teacher as well. And also creating a welcoming environment for not just teachers, our students, our families. And so we had to put that in place. One of the things that I shared, especially even with my office staff, was, if you think about it this way, if you have a business and you have your customers, and not to say that our parents are customers, but you want to make sure that when you have customers, you keep those customers because you want them to keep coming back. And so for us, we want to make sure that we create that positive environment for not just our students, but our families, that they can feel connected. So that was another priority. High expectations for our kids. Yes, we understand our kids are coming from various backgrounds, but that should not be an excuse to set low expectations. That's why we have the supports in place to support them. And so it's high expectation, nothing but high expectations for our kids, and also engaging lessons, class-wide expectation instruction. So we do have community partners that we partner with to support teachers, and also the curriculum that we have that the district gives us. When we talk about alignment, we talk about the district provide, we have Power School that we always are able to access the data, but we also have the principal dashboard that we are able to get the detailed data of our school-wide different areas, including attendance. And so we're able to hone it down into which students fall within tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, which students are we going to focus on. And so we're able to identify reasons for those absences to make, so that we're able to tailor support and interventions for those students. So we have that. We also have attendance counselor who comes in, pops into our attendance team meetings to give us feedback. We have nudge letters, resources that we're able to use, including our family engagement manager who supports us as well. So we have that in place. One of the things when we talk about attendance team, we always try to make sure that we're proactive and not trying to address chronic absences. And so at the beginning of the school year, we have our attendance team that includes a social worker, a school counselor, assistant principal. I have a teacher on board, and we also have teachers who actually do some of the work to support in terms of tier 1. And so every Monday we meet to look at the data on a weekly basis, because we're not waiting till the end to I call it autopsy. We're not doing that. We have to look at it and make decisions as we go. And so at the beginning, what was happening was that I was the one pulling the data. So I had to train all the team members to access the data, so that I'm not the only one doing the work, but they all can access the data. So for example, if I'm tied up somewhere, the meetings can take place without me. So my assistant principal is able to access the data on the dashboard, which is only for principal. She's able to access that. And everybody on the team is able to access the data and be able to meet it within without me, which is what is supposed to happen. So that's the shared leadership, in terms of taking ownership and responsibility for the work that we're doing in here. As far as welcoming environment, I do believe that any school takes on the leadership of the principal. And so my responsibility is making sure that when I come in, I'm setting the tone, taking care of not just students, but teachers as well. Because, we all are here for the students. But I also believe that I have to make sure that teachers have the right mindset to be able to teach kids. Because if they don't have that right mindset, that is going to affect students. So I have to make sure that, for example, we have the monthly potlucks. I also have a weekly newsletter. I try to highlight some good things happening in the school, teachers. And also, I know we shared a Marshall memo. I do receive it every week. So I try to pull different resources to support teachers. I also can say in terms of shared leadership, I was able to send some of, because when I came in, we didn't have any teacher who was team trained. And so my new teachers would have teachers from outside, and sometimes it's challenging for them to connect with the people, the mentors. And so I've sent teachers in the building who are now team trained, so they're able to support teachers in-house. We work with a consultant from Cormier Consulting, and we actually, as we speak, today we did learning walks. So teachers are able to go into classrooms to actually observe their peers, and we debrief and we talk about strengths and wondering. So this way, they're able to actually reflect on their own practices as well. And that's something that we're trying to do to make sure that we build their confidence and also create that environment for them to be open to new ideas and also changing their practice to improve student outcomes. In terms of family and family partnership and engagement, that was something that was not present here. But there were great things happening, but that was an area of growth. And so for my first year, we had a school governance council and also a PTO to make sure that we have parents as part of the work that we're doing. Because without a parent, we cannot get this work done. And I know that we always say we're communicating with parents, but it's one thing sending parents square messages. And it's another thing actually having them at the table and being part of the work that we're doing. And so what we did was trying to look at, so the attendance team, we looked at the year as a whole, every day, every month, what we're doing, every week, what we're doing. And I send weekly newsletters to families. And so in the newsletter, I talk about, in the newsletter, I have attendance information, what's happening this week. If I have to share any information for the week or any information, I do that. I share lunch menus. I share resources. I also have, it's like a chart for all the grade levels. And we're able to share, I pull the data and the percentages, because our weekly goal is 95% average daily attendance. And so I have that in that newsletter, so that parents see it, and I'll tell them, listen, please make sure if there's anything that we can do to support. One of the things, as somebody who speaks multiple languages, one of the things that I always make sure that I use the newsletters, the parents are able to translate into multiple languages. And so this way, parents are able to access the newsletter in their own language other than English. And I also try to add videos, because the fact that somebody speaks a language does not mean they can read. And so I make sure that there are videos in the language that they speak, either Spanish, because mostly most of our population is Spanish. We have Portuguese and also Portuguese, Spanish, and English. So I try to have videos to support that as well. And sending that ahead of time. So what I do is that, so this month I have, for example, March, April, in 3 months, they have what's ahead. So this way they can plan, because we can't wait till last minute to tell parents this is what's happening, because it's a lot of things that parents have to do. And so just giving them a heads up as to what's happening really helps. We've also increased, like, for example, looking at our data, we realized that on half days, students did not come to school. So we have spirit days on every half day. We also have golden tickets. So the teachers will put it under the seats of students. So if you're in school on those days, you get a prize. So we have that. We have different events for kids. We have events for families. We partnered with, we have a few community partners. So we do have Child Development Health Institute. They support us with resources in terms of mental health. And underneath, we have Favor Inc., and they have parental leadership training. So I have that I share with parents, or those are parental workshops. We also have our family literacy nights. So we have the literacy STEM night we put together. We have that. That's not the only one. We try to make sure that we have events throughout the year. So we've had paint night, and we tied it to literacy. And we have turnout, parents coming. We have dance for kids. A lot of events. It's all planned for the year, every month. And apart from the newsletter, we also send calendars for parents of what's happening every day. We do also have after school. As we speak, we have 3 after school programs because we do believe that having opportunities for kids after school. What I always think about is we can't complain that kids are always on computers at home doing nothing when we're not providing opportunities for them. And so for my first year, we have three programs going, and it's going second year, going on third year. 3 after school programs. We have extended school hours that addresses student academic needs. We do have partnership with Arts for Learning, and they provide free, fully funded after school program for our students, and that's enrichment. It's in the arts. We also have 21st century program for our students, and so it's a combination of enrichment and academic full support for our students. And as we speak, at the end of the month, we're starting unified sports for our students. So this is more of focus and targeting regular ed kids and now special education students so that they're able to have with their peers. So that's starting this end of this month, which will go into May. So that will be 4 after school programs. This is all in an attempt to get our kids to school because they're excited about the programs. They're going to show up, and that will help with what we're doing. The other thing is we also partner with HOT schools, higher order thinking schools. So Kingsbury is a higher order thinking school. We do have visiting artists that come in. They provide professional development for our teachers so that we're able to provide culturally responsive instruction and also making sure that our students feel welcome. They do that. We have integrated. We do have interdisciplinary learning where they plan with the teachers based on the curriculum, and they're able to come in. So that's an extension of what they're doing. That's the real world application of what they're learning so that the kids can see the purpose for why they're learning a certain topic. So we do have that, and it's been going well. We also have Safe Haven, and I know when we hear Safe Haven, we're thinking about domestic violence. Yes, that's part of it, but they provide lessons for healthy relationship for students and also for staff. And it's been wonderful. And also workshop for parents. We've done that. And what I do is every day, I make sure that I'm outside every day to welcome our kids because I have to set the tone for our children, our students, because we never know what our kids are going through. And so being out there, it's not just welcoming kids and creating that positive environment for them, but also communicating and interacting with our parents. So they already know me outside before, if anything happens, they call me. It's like that relationship, that cordial relationship, letting them feel that they're part of this work. And I make sure that I'm constantly communicating that with them. And like I said, we can talk about connecting and communicating with parents, but it's about body language and how we talk to them and how we respond to them. It's like the intuition that we get we get when we talk to somebody. That's how it goes. So I always make sure that I talk to my staff, make sure that if something happens, reach out to the parent right away before the kid gets home. Because this way, we're building that connection, have that communication right at the beginning of the school year. What I did this year, just always making sure that we're reflecting on what we're doing, whether it's working or not. I had a spreadsheet of all the new parents to Kingsbury, and I personally called them at the end of the second week of school. And I checked in with them and I said, listen, this is Mrs. Cam. I know that you're new to Kingsbury School. Just checking in to see how things are going for your student. And also you as well. Is there anything that we can do to support what's going well? What is it that we can do? And every one of them, and they were very appreciative of that. And so this is the approach that we're trying to use, and always being there for the parents. I know
Excuse
that,
me. Oh, I just wanted to add because you've had so much, and this may be part of the next slide, but a key part of what you were talking about when we visited was that how you worked with teachers to address behaviors in the classroom, and you really worked on building that interactive curriculum. If you could talk about that, and maybe that's on the next slide as well.
Thank you. So what we do, so we do have the behavior school student expectation like I was talking about, but it's important. I'm sorry, that's our bell. It's important that teachers understand what like the tiers in terms of behavior expectations, right? Tier 1, what is tier 2, what is tier 3? what is a support call, what is disciplinary. So we have that flow chart that I had to PD. It was a PD going over every step of those tiered in terms of what is it that is falls under tier one, what falls under tier two. And then we role played in terms of what is a support call. What is it that student exhibit that will require you to call a school counselor or social worker? And what is a behavior referral? So what is it that you have to, when it happens in your classroom, you have to do a office referral. What is your responsibility? So we did that as a staff to go over those expectations so that we're not referring student unnecessarily to the office for disciplinary action. The other thing is, a few years ago, my assistant principal and I had the opportunity to be selected to go for training. There was a professional development that was offered by our district for turnaround school. Kingsbury is not a turnaround school, but we were selected to join the training, and so we were trained on trauma. And so what we did was turnkey that information to train us teachers to make sure they know what the phases of trauma look like, what it looks like in the classroom, so that we're not unnecessarily referring kids for disciplinary action instead of providing the support. So it's more of an MTSS process, a tiered intervention to make sure that students are getting what they need. And so what, in addition to that, we did in terms of having CDHI, Child Development Health Institute, their partner with Kingsbury School. So they provide resources, they provide training and assessment as far as where we are in the work that we're doing. And so we got grant to provide in every classroom, we have a comment corner. And these corners have weighted blankets, we have fidgets, we have mood meters, different things that if a kid needs a moment, they can go there instead of disciplinary referral, go to the office. So making sure that teachers know what the expectations are, what tier one is, what tier two is, what tier three is, what we can do in our own classroom to support students, when to send a student to the school counselor. So every classroom has that support to help students. Also,
And, all right, we're just because we're coming down, there's a lot to cover, and I know we wanted the next slide to just come up. So if we could get the next slide, please. But I know we want to also answer some questions that had come out. And one is reevaluating your work. Like, how do you know you're on target? Sometimes people wonder, like, I'm doing a lot, but it doesn't seem to have an impact right in this one area. What do you do to reevaluate that work? And so you have to answer quickly because I've got another question to also ask.
Thank you. So it's about reflection, reflection, reflection. So my first year, we were reflecting every Friday. So we meet Monday, reflect Friday. So this year we meet 2 times, Monday morning to go over our goals for the week. And that's an admin, only admin team. So there are different levels. We have an instructional leadership team that we meet once a week. Attendance team meets in once a week. And also my assistant principal and I, we also look at reflect. So we have our goals, Fridays we reflect. And that's why I call our school improvement plan as a living document. So it's not just there, but we look at it, what's working, what's not working. If we have to change course, we change course. We're not married to a strategy that's not working. And so we look at it, and the attendance team will look at what's happening, what we have to change. So for example, we bought a popcorn machine, right? We're trying, I'm looking, because we're not where we're not there yet. Yes, we're making progress, but we always want to make improvement. So we're getting a slushy machine, any ideas out there that can benefit us. That's what we're doing. I shout kids out every Friday. So it's a constant reflection on instruction, operations, climate, and culture, because ultimately attendance comes under climate and culture, and we want our kids to feel safe. I call every student by their names. I greet them every day whenever I see them in the hallway. And it's important for them to know, have this trusted adult. They know that you care. If I'm looking at the data and I see that a student is not, they're on the computer, but they're not passing, I get, listen, I was looking at your data. I see that you spent 80 minutes, but you didn't pass the lesson. What's going on? So this way they know that we care about them. So it's constant reflection on what we're doing. If it's not working, we drop and we find different strategies to help our team. And so that's what we're doing to make sure that.
I want to Thank you very much. We're really at time, and I think Caroline needs a few seconds to close everything up, but you gave a lot of great suggestions of what you do, and really, really appreciate the insights you've shared. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Principal Sam. I think that everybody on this call will agree the concrete examples that you've shared and that multi-layered, multi-pronged approach is proving to be so effective. And it's very clear to me as I listen to you speak that your passion, your expertise, and you are a champion for your students and families, and they are so lucky to have you. And we really appreciate you sharing your expertise this morning. And thank you everyone for being here. Next slide, please, Jaren. We are gathering again on next slide. We are gathering again on February 24th for our second in this little mini series with Attendance Works. This time we will be highlighting success stories from both Norwalk Public Schools and from Danbury Public Schools. So thank you so much for kicking this off, Susan, Emma, Hannah. We greatly appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing everybody in another couple of weeks. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and thanks for being here.